I think we are ready.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our second study session for goal setting for the 2021-22 fiscal year. I know there was a previous study session and a lot of the information from that got compiled, and we looked at a document that staff provided for us to give rankings for. And so Karen, is that something you're ready to share on the screen?
Yeah, it's a lot of data, so I emailed out sort of the rankings to each of you this afternoon, but I will go ahead and share my screen. So what you have before you, I could maybe tell me if you want me to make it a little bit larger, is sort of what is the middle tab on the rankings that came to you just before this meeting. And what we did is we took all of last year's priority projects that were approved by the council, and then in sort of this orange-brown typeset, we added in all of the priorities that you identified at your first goal setting session that came from the stakeholder meeting. So all of that orange brown type is directly from your stakeholder meetings that became your priorities from the stakeholder meetings. And where we could embed those into existing priority projects, such as homelessness services, we did so. If we did not already have a category, such as mental health services, then that just became a new priority project goal number. And then you ranked all of those. So there were primary goals, and then there were secondary, all of the sub-goals that were under them. You were asked to rank them separately, rank all of your top priority project goals, so ranking your top 10, and then rank 20 of what the priority sub-goals were. And so what we've done is we've reordered everything based on those rankings. So the top priority, just as an example, the top priority project was develop a 2 to 3 year homelessness reduction strategy framework. So kind of the overarching goal around housing and homelessness services that received the highest score of 1.4. So a low number in this case is a high priority ranking. 1 would have been the lowest score you could have gotten. That would have meant all of you rated that a 1. Under that, there were A through J of sub goals for housing and homelessness strategies. And if it is kind of in this darker green shading, that meant that it really ranked as kind of one of the top 10 sub goals. The light green shading meant that it was in sort of that next category of priority sub goals, numbers 11. I think we ended at about 23, 24, because there were a lot of ties in there. So again, it just kind of gives you a sense of the ratings of each of them. So this sheet, I think, is the easiest to go through. Kayla also, our administrative assistant, also did do, you'll see on your third tab, she did just take all of those sub goals and just throw them into one sheet, kind of the top 24, ranking those in order as well, if you wanted to look at that. But I think the easiest way to go through your goals is going to be to go through the primary numbers. And we'll just, I think, determine then as a group, obviously these first 10 or 15 or so will stay in. And then if there is specific sub goals, or if there's specific word changes or concept changes that you'd like to see, and then if there are sub goals that you'd like to for sure keep, sub goals that you think we should not prioritize in terms of time, staff resources, or funding this year, that we would take out of that particular goal, and then we can bring you back, maybe at either a third goal setting session or at a council meeting or through a budget process, sort of a cleaned up version of this. So does that feel like just way too much for a Thursday night at 6 o'clock? Okay, Sarah says she's in.
Let's do it.
All right, Mayor, so do you want to start at the top and work your way down? Or the alternative, you start at the bottom of the list and see if there's the ones that you want to take off. But I would say starting at the top around your high priorities would be advisable where your discussion would be. And then we do have, several people also in attendance. I don't know if you want to do public comment at the beginning or midway through, or after you go through them once. You can decide that as you go.
Why don't we do public comment now before we get into discussion?
So there were several kind of late in the day blue folder items. If you received some of those as well. So there might be things that you want to review. I'm going to need to be able to get back to participants. Okay. So if you are interested in making public comment into tonight's City Council goal session, please go ahead and raise your hand. All right, well, we at least have one. Go ahead, Colin.
Hello, good evening, council members. It's Colin Fisk with the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. And just to start, I haven't seen the document that you're looking at now, so my comments are based on what was in the agenda packet for what that's worth. So hopefully they're still relevant. So yeah, I want to say that I appreciate that I saw included in the draft goals, what I believe are the draft goals, some improvements to the transportation system, particularly non-motorized transportation. And I want to suggest that, improving those systems can be an important strategy for meeting a lot of the council's other goals pertaining to resident safety and comfort and local energy independence, health of residents, climate leadership, etc. And one thing that I think is not explicitly addressed that I haven't seen in the goals and objectives is improving public transit. And I think that's really important for both equity and climate reasons, and would encourage you to call that out specifically. I also noticed in the listing of objectives, establishing a energy efficient and pedestrian friendly transportation web between neighborhoods. I think that's great. And I think that gets directly at the importance of one of the suggestions that I had previously made, which is to pursue network analysis for bike and pedestrian connectivity. And I also wanted to remind the council of CRTP's report that we released last summer about climate chaos and the safety crisis for bikes and pedestrians, and increasing vehicular automation and how to respond to those phenomena. And we're currently working with an HSU intern to develop a near-term policy guide for the city of Arcata to implement suggestions in that report. But in the meantime, I hope that you will view that as a resource for your planning purposes. I also would like to just briefly comment on some of the specific projects. There's too many to get into detail on, but I wanted to highlight the capital improvement plan. And just to point out that while there's a lot of great stuff in there for active transportation, far and away the most costly item to the city is the annual paving allocation. And I won't argue with the need for repaving in many instances, but it is sort of hard to accept that the city is spending so much more on paving than on safety improvements and sidewalk improvements and traffic calming and trails and accessibility improvements and all of those things combined. So I want to encourage you to adopt a policy that incorporates active transportation, transit, and traffic calming improvements into the annual paving maintenance plan. In other words, when a street is being repaved and restriped, that's the easiest and cheapest time to make over the street for other purposes. And I think it should be the city's policy, as other cities have done, not to let those opportunities go to waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. If there's anybody else that would like to make a public comment, if you're on a phone, press *9. I'm on Zoom, press raise your hand. Okay, I see no other public comment.
I think I saw one hand get raised by a call-in user.
Oh, yep, came in. Okay. Go ahead, call-in user. think we can hear. Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, it's Joanne McGarry, and once again, I'm technically challenged by this meeting. On my little iPad, I can hardly see the information that Karen was going through on all your goal settings and all, but I just want to say that safety and security in our community is really important to me, and I'm feeling pretty traumatized still by the stabbing that I witnessed, and found out that the incident when I was watching, it was actually the stabber escorting the person he had stabbed down the sidewalk rather than somebody helping the man. And so I just also want to say that it was disturbing also that I couldn't get into City Hall to protect myself, and that I think we really need to start looking at our City Hall and other buildings as being more available, and people be more available to us at times, even if they need to be locked. It's just sort of hard to accept that our public buildings, the members of the public have limited access to them. And I also look forward to a time when we can have our city council meetings in person, even if they can be outdoors somewhere like in Crab Field on the bleachers or something, because this ongoing technology stuff is not really as democratic as it could be. And, you know, there's lots of other stuff I could talk about right now, but finally a reminder that the climate crisis is real. We declared an emergency in September 2019 for the city of Arcata, and everything needs to be looked at in that regard with the climate crisis at hand. So thank you, and I hope to see you all in person real soon.
Thanks, Joanne. And thank you, Colin.
Okay. And so just so listeners know, if you did have information from the packet, this list of goals and priority projects is in that list. This is simply reordered based on prioritization that the council did. So the goal numbers have remained the same. They're just placed on my screen in order. So if you have a sheet that you already looked at, this top goal is goal number 2 on the sheet, so it's in the packet still. It's just placed first here because it ranked as the highest priority when the council reviewed these independently.
Okay, so this being a top goal, I guess we should go through and determine sub goals that we want to keep in here. Is that, I think with limited resources, it would be helpful for us to determine like what are the top goals that we want under this category. So let's see. And so the dark green is those that had the highest
priority ranking number. So yeah, the lower the number, the higher the priority.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful.
So C is the top one in this category. Actually, C I think is the top one overall for all of your sub goals, and that was to identify an ongoing funding stream, whether it's sales tax, property tax, prepare a ballot measure for voters to consider in 2022. I think is, based on this council's conversation about needing to make ongoing investment in ending homelessness. Whereas something like IME or mental health service, a ranking of 21 means none of you listed that as a priority at all because you listed 1 through 20. And I'm assuming that's because that's completely duplicative of the mental health goal. So that's an easy one, I think, to take out of this category.
Okay. So yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, would it be possible to zoom in just a little bit? It is a little bit hard to read. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You guys can see it. Try to get, this is a big one in the screen. I can.
Are we able to keep all 5 of the dark green categories. I mean, I think those look great.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what the pleasure of the group was at this point. Do we want to do a first rundown of accepting the dark green ones, and maybe we can hide the rows of what's not dark green and see what we think of those alone in these different categories? Or do we want to go through the ones that are lighter or the lower priorities and discuss any of those? Or do we feel like the ratings alone are a good starting place?
I think that the rankings that we all did seem like a good starting place. I like that idea.
Yeah, and is there an ideal? Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
No. I was just gonna say I like that idea of hiding the rows. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, is there an ideal number for like the number of these sub goals? Is it too, excitable to pick 5, or is 5 fine, or does it really matter?
I mean, what I would say is, I think in general, like 3 to 5 under a category probably makes sense. But I think then looking at the content of them, right? Some of these might be bigger than others in different categories. So maybe 5 in one section is not actually that much when you look at the more detail of it. Like maybe it's like, okay, those are some pretty like achievable smaller goals. I think if they're like 5 very lofty goals underneath a category, then maybe we would need to like discuss on feasibility and how to refine. But I don't think there's necessarily a number limit for us to consider. I think it's more of like the content. I think 5 is probably a good amount underneath a particular goal, especially if it's our top goal. Right. So if it's our number one goal that we all agree upon, then that probably does make sense for us to flesh that out quite a bit. But I'm open to your feedback.
I feel like all 5 of these work really well together because two of them, 3 of them involve finding funding, working with Arcata House or the day center with funding, and also the possible ballot initiative. And then the safe space and camping and day center, those can all combine together as well. So I feel like it's a pretty complete package. And yes, it's a huge one, but even if we could, if we could get started on it, it'd be good.
I'm not
Agreed.
Go ahead.
Just saying agreed.
I'm not clear on how these are our top 5 goals. When I look at like under Valley West, for example, there's a priority 3 and a 5 that also have higher average scores.
I think what it means is underneath the category, the larger category that's been prioritized, those are the top goals underneath that policy objective.
Well,
Okay.
we ranked all of those sub priorities together. So, if you look at like this right-hand column, priorities 1 through 10, that's where those numbers line up from our overall rankings of every sub priority. But
Well, and then I thought we were supposed to pick 20 sub priorities. Why is it just 1 through 10?
It's 1 through 10 for the larger categories, and then it was 20 for the subcategory.
Sure.
The goals.
And so, right, that makes sense to me. And so if it's priorities 1 through 10 for the larger categories, and this, I only see 1, 2, and 3 in this list of 5.
Right. So when you're looking at the Valley West, and you're seeing a 3 and a 5. So on that, what I'm going to say is column I on this second column of rankings, this is just showing you the rankings of those sub goals. Does that make sense? So
we were told to pick 20 sub goals, but we're only ranking 1 through 10.
No, there's 13, here's 15.
And how come it says priorities 1 through 10?
Oh, on the top there?
Yeah.
I think it's just a typo. There you go. All right.
problem
Okay.
solved.
Okay.
All right,
Settle down, Brett. All right.
Check that off the list. 1 goal taken care of.
Right.
Already making steps forward.
Yes.
Good job, team.
So I guess the question is like this B in this, this top priority goal. Can we remove that focus for this year?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to say, I wanted to kind of say at the beginning too, is that some of these items that I didn't rank particularly high is actually because I felt like some of them are integrated into the standard work that is happening in our city. So there are certain things on here that I felt like they're very important, and I feel like they're already, like, those are things that are happening as a standard process. So I just wanted to articulate that for especially those that are watching. If there's something you see on here, I feel like it's, you know, a part of our housing strategy to look at all different income level housing. So it's not to say that's not something we're working on, just saying it's not necessarily something that we need to put an additional focus on when we have limited resources. It's something that may already be happening. And that may not be for all of them, but I just wanted to give some context. That's always hard, I think, with goal setting. But just thought I would add that from my perspective, at least. I don't know if others feel similarly, but that's something when I went through, I felt, oh, like some of these things are really important. And I feel like they're a part of what we do as a city.
Absolutely felt the same way, or that they could be incorporated into other things that where I ranked higher, but I was like, I think this kind of covers the lower ranked thing as well. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I felt the same when I was trying to narrow it down.
So I have a suggestion just for process. It'll end up in a longer document, but I think it would save us a lot of debate on every single issue if it was done. The word for it is escaping me, but like if we could show, you know, the top goals, and then we have our dark green ones, and then spaced over we have the light green ones, and then spaced over we have the no color ones, so that everything is still showing as to where our thoughts and our desires are. So like if for some great reason we're just doing so good with our Valley West improvements, then we get through those green ones and the light yellows, and why not move on to the other ones? I just think it might be easier than, you know, I think it's going to be painful to try to remove ones.
So are you saying just like, given that there's like tabs at the bottom of the Excel sheet, that we could take the light green ones, for example, put those in a separate tab for this discussion, or?
No, I just meant for like the overall end document, that, you know, just creating a longer wish list, but making it prioritized so we can see like these are where our priorities are ranked. And so obviously if it's, you know, if it's shifted into a certain category, we know that like to identify and pursue policy changes for low income housing. We're not taking it off the list, but we're going to work on the stuff above it first.
Got it.
And I'm not married to that. It was just a thought.
No. I see where you're going. I think that makes sense.
I mean, I think we should still talk about every category, you know, and make sure that we are happy with what's the color coding. I just feel like it's going to be hard to remove things.
Sure. So I guess a question before we move into multiple categories. So would we want to, knowing that we have the dark green ones as the highest priorities based on the rankings, do we just want to just really quickly look at the whiter, lighter ones and go, okay, yes, we can move on to, like, let's kind of clean up this document a little bit so that we're looking at the dark green stuff for everything, but let's just do a quick run through of the lighter stuff just to make sure we didn't miss something, or if someone feels very strongly about something, they have an opportunity to bring it up. But that way we can have more of a focus on the dark green stuff that we all rated highly. So being like, okay, we see the white and the light stuff, let's just do a quick rundown. Is there, you know, are we okay with, you know, moving forward with hiding those for now so that we can see that bigger picture of the dark green? Excuse me.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I think we've had some time to look through this one in particular. So are we Any thoughts before we hide the lower rated stuff and move on to Valley West? And then at the end, we can do just a run through of what we've prioritized. Okay. Okay, so now we're looking at Valley West.
This is one of those ones where I feel like there's quite a few things that are in the white category that fit in other things. Landscaping and beautification, that's already in one of the other categories. Activities pretty much goes with community center, so on and so forth. So those seem happy with the dark green ones.
And we did pick as one of our goals, I think, arts. And so that's why I didn't pick C, because that's included in the broader arts category.
So I'm hearing maybe we could remove A, B, and C because they're already included.
Mm-hmm.
I think D is important, though it is a lower ranked one, but I feel like it doesn't quite fit into any of those. But I think generally we have talked a lot about police presence in Valley West, and if there is a chance for there to be a substation there, or if they're working, with Arcata House on, having a time that they can meet with them at their new offices in Valley West. So I don't know how other people feel about D, but I think D is an important one to include in this category as well.
Well, we could add F in and then hide that one. Seems like nuisance property enforcement goes in that whole same category.
I think the reason I didn't rank that one higher was just because I'm hoping with some of the other priorities we put in Valley West that there won't be as much policing needed. So that was just my only thought with that.
Well, let's see, looking at E and J, seems like there's kind of some general consensus on maybe those for being lower priorities. Okay. Okay, well, I'm wondering if maybe as we go through these, if there's things that we need to go back and talk about, we can. So I think let's maybe for now leave D up, and then let's go through the other ones, and then we can kind of run through the list and see how we should refine or not. Okay. So yeah, so for example, mental health services was ranked really high, but then the kind of the sub goals are in that lighter green. So we didn't have anything that necessarily rose, that rose to the top of the list, but clearly the category itself, the subject area itself is a high priority for our council.
If we're gonna,
I think like for B, for hiring, more missed workers, there is some proposed legislation to actually fund such things. So it's just being proposed and worked on, but it's Katie Porter who's working on it and wants to have direct money to cities to do exactly what we're doing. So there might be some funding coming that could make that even a bigger program than what we have.
Yeah, I was going to say B seems like it fits nicely into things we're already working on, but also could be good to keep a focus on.
Yeah, and it seems like in terms of our rating, it also seemed like the highest one out of this category that we had support for. So yeah, it makes sense.
And I think C is, I think it's important. It's automatically going to happen because we do have a lot of resources. And so if we're looking to create spaces and things, we're going to need to really scrutinize our resources and how we're using them.
And I think A and C can almost kind of go together too. If you're creating a working group, within that working group, you can identify those resources, so.
So I guess a question is, do we feel that like A and C are part of things that we're already doing and want to focus just on B, or do we want to combine A and C? What's the feel of the group?
I like the idea of combining them and then just kind of keeping both, because if we're, we can hire, there's two very different things. It's, create a collaborative group and space to talk about these things and identify these resources and create plans. And then also this other piece of hiring people and, getting funding for these, intervention strategies.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Oh, Karen, you're muted.
How does that work as for a draft?
That's why you're the city manager. You're really good at taking all of our ideas and putting them in.
We'll clean up as we go when we bring these back.
Great.
All right, so 1, 2, 3. This was your fourth priority, was the infrastructure. And in this category was this top and kind of number 6 of the sub goals. A working group around the HSU campus, city walking corridors, lighting, banners, street, sidewalk, and other art, connecting footbridge. What else in this category would you like to keep or not?
See, the paving overlay on G Street is something I've been pushing for I don't know, maybe a couple of years now. And I just think as we talk about our partnership with HSU and working together with them and city beautification, the court, I don't know if they're corridors or not, but G and H Street are kind of the main thoroughfares when I think tourists come to town, when students come to visit, when parents come to visit. And I just feel like it would really be beneficial if we were doing what we could to make sure those two stretches were looking as good as they could.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because D is, develop a working group and talk about these things, but it kind of lacks the action of, okay, then let's work on this beautification of G and H Street and work on the paving and improving that city corridor. So you have the discussion of it, but then you have the action as well.
Any other thoughts on this area?
I would just say that like B and C, I feel like kind of go together. Sorry, I just want to keep like consolidating all of them into one, more longer, lengthy goals, I guess. But if we're going to work on improving this corridor and we want to, work on G Street, then we might as well hop over one block. And maybe, I don't know if other people agree with that, but I just, they seem like they kind of go together to me.
What planter is B referring to? Planters.
Planters, those two large ones that reduce the lane size down to one lane.
Got it. They have like trees that are maybe dead.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Some beautiful weeds just kind of pop out, yeah.
No, I'm not going to argue against anything that has to do with plants and beautification. So.
And I guess the big question is, do we really want to focus around the G and H Street area? This A is G and H Street, but it is south of Samoa, so a little bit different region. If we're trying to prioritize.
I'm okay with leaving A off the list for now.
Any other thoughts on this section?
Can we hide E, F, G, H, and I? Not to say some of that won't come up, but.
Yeah.
We have another special events one.
One J, to remove the Plaza Center to ground level, I feel like is an important one that we kind of agreed on in the past.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's one I had rated a little bit higher myself. I also know that it's actually a really easy thing for us to do, or not easy, but like it's a pretty low cost thing for us to do. So I also understand if we don't make it a high priority goal, if we know that it can be just budgeted.
Well, I think it's also part of the Plaza Task Force recommendation, so that's why I gave it a higher ranked it as well, because
for me, it's like I'm fine with it being a high priority goal on our list or otherwise. I think just as long as we budget for it in the next year, given that it was relatively low cost, like that to me is probably the more important part. So if we need it in here to help indicate to the community we're going to budget for this and we're going to do it, great,
Okay.
I'm fine leaving. Oh, I was just gonna say I'm fine leaving it in. I think that we have some loftier goals, so it's nice to have a few easier goals too that feel really doable. So I'm totally good with that.
That's a good point.
Okay, economic recovery.
I mean, I feel like they're all kind of important. A, we're already doing with our collaborative meetings, so that's something easy. That's easy just to keep going. Doesn't cost us anything. And I feel like we're already working on C. That's something that's already in motion. And then D is, seems like an important one too.
And B, we could perhaps, well, that's a little bit broader because it also has Valley West.
Although I'm wondering in terms of that working group on different thoroughfares and stuff, I mean, on some level, Valley West is pretty connected to the importance of those other streets too. Like if we think about people's impression of Arcata, if they're connected to HSU, they probably the first time they're coming to visit Humboldt State, they're staying in Valley West.
Right.
I mean, so maybe that is something we can just fold in.
And B is already, well, for specifically Valley West is already kind of under that Valley West category because we already included maintenance and beautification in that category. And we just improved, I think the HSU one is kind of under the infrastructure. And so we're already kind of including in other places, but I think leaving it on there does, no harm either. Just reminds us that we got to do it.
Very true. Yeah, I totally agree.
And then when we do it, we can cross off two things.
I love my list of people here. Okay. So the strategic infill development plan.
So some of these, like this project, has been building funding, grant funding for several years. So while it is, whether or not it's a council goal, that planning process is underway, and you'll be approving the bid for that soon for the second piece of that work.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw this one. Of like, I feel it's a high priority, but looking at the sub goals, I felt like those were things that we're already incorporating, like with the general plan updates and gateway plan. And truly, I
You
mean,
can guess
finding
what I, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say you can guess probably what I'm gonna say, but I feel like, you know, if A, then B. If we're gonna go with this goal A here, have, you know, the corridor plan and all of that, that's about building housing. It's about building infill, which goes with B, build more types of housing. So, and there are things what we're already doing as well. So.
I would suggest, David, you know, chime in if you have a different opinion, but C is already deeply incorporated into the bid. So that's just going to be a natural outcome of the infill plan. You probably don't need to call it out as a specific piece. I think last year when we put this in, it was make sure you don't forget about that when you put out the RFP. But now that it's out and incorporated in, you probably don't need to call it out as a specific piece if that's all right with the council. Okay, and then we have the Plaza Improvement Task Force.
How do folks feel about leaving in the light green one?
Looks good to me.
Yeah, I will say I do feel like maintenance of the plaza has been a priority for the city. You know, I know it may not be to everyone's expectations, but I feel like it has something we've invested a lot of resources into. So I do feel like that's like a part of what we do as a city is try to maintain that plaza. So for me, I didn't feel like B needed to be its own separate goal.
I agree.
Okay, and then the next one is a rental code inspection program. You know, we do believe you will have this completed before the end of this fiscal year. So.
Sorry, I've been working on this a while. I'm like, across the finish line.
Yeah, so if that's the case, you know, we can remove it from your goal list for next year. I think at this point, it's going to be before you, if you're okay with that.
I know that's the one that messed my numbers up because I scrolled down and I was like, wait, oh, that's important. And I was like, oh, but aren't we already doing that? And then, so I had to go back and change some of my numbers on that one.
Same. I had the same experience.
We won't lose sight of it. Don't worry. And then the strategic arts plan, it's in here as implementation. You will also be seeing that before the end of the fiscal year for adoption.
Any comments on that, or do we feel like that in and of itself doesn't necessarily need sub goals since it's the plan? Okay.
Okay, we get to zero waste. And I guess the question here is really, are there any priorities around how we're working on solid waste and recycling? The council will have a presentation on what we call SB 1383, which is a Senate bill that's required several things around solid waste and recycling, but what is sort of, we are on the verge of having regulation around as of January 2022 is on organics, food waste, green waste, at the curb, from residential as well as from multifamily and commercial. So we're working on strategies around that now, but that's probably really going to be the focus because of the regulatory timeframe of staff's time on zero waste this year.
And I apologize since I wasn't at the first session. I'm wondering with this, we just make zero waste and then support implementation of SB 1383. Because it is a huge policy shift that's going to require us regionally. This is something HWMA is looking at. We're recruiting an executive director, with this like being one of the core things they're going to be working on. So it is a big deal, that alone, having more of a focus on organics. That'd just be a suggestion I would have. I don't know if there's any other ideas that folks want to bring in or recommendations on
That
this
sounds
category.
good to me.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right, then the other one is around park improvements. Some of these we do have grant funding for, which I know many of you are aware of. So for example, Shea Park, Carlson Park, we have grants that have been submitted that you've approved submittal of. But I don't know if there were some specific things that you thought. I mean, it does seem like Carlson Park should still be a priority. I don't, I don't know about specific for caretakers unit or bike camping spaces. That's at the discretion of the council. I would say it's not what we're hearing in terms of priorities from the neighborhood meetings that many of you have attended. But finalized development plans for Carlson Park with community input.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some, but could still do some more.
I think that we should keep showing on our list the projects that we do have funding for, so that we know that's where what we're focusing on and working on. And then it could be, more general, like how you're changing B to B. It could, we don't have to be too specific, but.
Also, I was excited about G, and I recall, didn't we talk about a grant that was in the process for the Annie Mary Trail, or am I thinking incorrectly?
We do, yeah. We covered that on the capital improvement program. We did receive a grant for 4.2 million for actual construction. We're in the final design and environmental phase of that project. So, yeah. And you also, we are working through it. We do have some grant funding for the initial bike pump track at Redwood Park. We don't have any identified funding at this time for Sunday Bray Park, or for a Music in the Forest program, or for any kind of camping at Carlson or Bayview.
I'd be okay with hiding the Music in the Forest program.
I would be in favor of hiding all three of those you just mentioned that we just don't have funding for, and I don't think that they are high priorities for everybody right now, but I don't know how others feel.
I agree with Sarah.
Me too.
All right, so last year the council created a goal of reviewing our transit system, where Arcata, Mad River, and the regional transit system routes overlapped, and working with HSU to kind of identify future needs and 5 years of alternative transportation. So they had some really specific pieces. This project got put on hold through the COVID process, and in large part because there was very little face-to-face student instruction. So we just didn't have our population to be engaged in the process. So it's whether or not you want us to sort of revamp this going into this next fiscal year, if this is still a priority area.
Well, I think that whenever we're discussing any type of development or project, that we should visit the transportation to it as part of that. So I don't know how that falls in, but I feel like that's an important piece of our overall plan is transportation. So just being thoughtful of that whenever we are doing projects.
I think that's a really good point. That, yeah, as we talk about all these other things, I completely agree. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to say, like, I'm not super attached to any of these, but I think that A could be worth looking at again. And I think it kind of goes along the lines of what Stacy was saying.
Any other thoughts?
It's really big. I'll fix it.
Okay, anything else to discuss in this area?
Are we removing some of A through E or no? Stacy was, I think, kind of advocating for just replacement here.
Well, I guess I just wasn't really sure of the details between A and E, so I just kind of made that broad statement because I'm just not so familiar with some of those.
I'm okay with the broad statement.
Me too.
Yeah, I think I kind of see it as being similar to like when, we're looking at other policies and we're looking at things through a lens of like climate change and environmental impact. And it's just a lens that we bring to when we're working on a project. It doesn't necessarily have to be something separate from what we're doing. I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, your next one is the Arcata All Electric Initiative. We had a few presentations on this just prior to the seating of the new council. Emily Benvey is here, who has been working with the subcommittee from the Energy Committee on this, and would be happy just to give you a quick update if you want to understand sort of what the options are around this, if you'd like to keep this in your goals tonight. Sound all right, Mayor?
Sure, yeah.
Go ahead, Emily.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. Good evening, council members and members of the public. So I thought it might be helpful to provide a little bit of background on some of the work surrounding the electric initiative. And to provide a bit of context, about 20% of Arcata's greenhouse gas emissions come from building energies to heat, cool, and power buildings. Of that, about 50 to 60% is coming from natural gas. And so to help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and combat climate change, it's important to move toward electrifying buildings. And so that's the basis for Arcata's all electric initiative. Back in November of 2020, city staff, along with Ms. Steve Berseri, who works with the California Energy Codes and Standards Program, and Energy Committee members, provided council with an update on different options for electrification on new building construction. And of those options, we considered electric preferred reach codes, incentivizing and encouraging electrification of buildings, all electric reach codes, and then prohibition of construction for new natural gas infrastructure using an ordinance mechanism, either through public health and safety code or police powers. And so effectively that achieves the same goal as the all electric reach code. The mechanism is just a little different. And then we also looked at an all electric ordinance for space and water heating only. So of those 4 options that we looked at, we pulled out 4 key findings. One is that reach codes must be approved by the California Energy Commission. They must be proved to be cost effective, and they must be renewed with the building code cycle, which is typically every 3 years. Natural gas moratoriums are simpler to approve, and they maintain their longevity through the different building code cycles. They've also been the mechanism that other jurisdictions have shifted toward within the last year for cities pursuing decarbonization. All electric reach codes, as I mentioned, achieve essentially the same outcome as an all electric ordinance. And then all electric space and water heating requirements only aren't recommended because they essentially result in what has been termed a sunk investment, where the infrastructure for natural gas gets installed, but it's only used for appliances. And so that those costs get spread across ratepayers, and it really just sinks the investment. So given all those factors, should council consider to include phasing out natural gas in new construction as part of Arcata's all electric initiative, staff recommends continuing to explore the development of an all electric ordinance during this upcoming fiscal year.
So that would, I guess, specifically change I mean, it's kind of B, I guess. Is that where you'd put it in, Emily?
Yeah, I would say it's a hybrid of B and C. I think the electric preferred reach codes speak more toward B, whereas the all electric ordinance blends with C. And so my recommendation, if the council would like to move forward with pursuing an electrification ordinance, would be to clarify that language in the goals. And staff, there's a lot of nuances to work through. So staff would come back in this upcoming fiscal year with a whole range of alternatives in pursuit of that ordinance.
Thanks, Emily. Are there any thoughts from the council about that?
I would just say, considering that staff has already done a significant amount of work towards this, and also I have received quite a number of emails regarding this as well, that I believe that it should be included in our priority list, and seems like something easy to accomplish if the council is interested in it, because staff has already done that legwork and has done the majority of it.
Any other thoughts? I agree.
Yeah, I'm on the same page.
Me too.
There you go, Emily. You got your direction.
Okay, can I take A through E out, or are there other ones that you want to keep in as priorities?
No, I think that's good for me.
And some of that's just going to happen anyway. We do have a green fleet policy already in place, so we are looking at, electric fleet conversion as well. All right, then the next one is citywide disaster plan. So you did approve the updated citywide emergency operations plan and all of our annexes this year. The bulk of that work is done. The will of the council to keep it on a goal. We will be doing additional training that Gillian Martin with the Lead for America Fellowship received a National League of Cities grant for coming in the spring. CERT training to all of our staff, and the council will be invited to go through that training as well. And we will be planning some testing and tabletop exercises associated with that, but certainly if the council wants that to remain a priority, it can stay on the list.
I'll just say that's the field I work in, but there was a part of me that was like, I feel like this is like something that's just ingrained in what our city is doing. So I'm fine either way, whether it's on here or whether it's not, because I do feel like the city has made that investment over the past couple of years, and it feels now it's a part of the function of the city to be doing disaster preparedness, which I'm really grateful for. So whatever folks think, but that's just my 2 cents.
I like to leave it on.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okie doke, we will move on. Great.
All right, your next one is maintaining a strong partnership with Humboldt State University. And then there were some specific things that the council was focused on last year, continuing in our partnership on Equity Arcata, options and costs for lighting along D Street, handouts that outline the connection points between the city and HSU. Some of that was I would say compiled through HSU's strategic planning session this fall. Student art and theater, street banners, which we maybe caught in an earlier goal, and street mural program for HSU themed art. There are ones in here that you'd like to maintain or remove?
Well, for me, the one that I gave ranking to was continue to support Equity Arcata, just because I believe B through F can all be found in our others. And I think that, well, at least, yeah, that we do consider our relationship with HSU in a lot of our decision making. So I was hesitant to rank that category low because I didn't want it to look as if it weren't important, but I feel like we do a good job of that. So to me, the Equity Arcata should definitely be left on there. And I'm fine with hiding the others just because I think that they're covered in other places.
Any other thoughts?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I agree with that, and that I forgot to put down continue supporting Equity Arcata because it kind of felt like built into me. I definitely want to continue supporting Equity Arcata, so I'd be happy to leave that on there. I really enjoy getting to have that as a liaison position this year. So yeah, I will just say I forgot to rank that because in my mind it was built in, but I'm really glad you brought that up, Stacey.
I'd like B to be specifically mentioned somewhere. It's something that HSU's asked for a while now. I know it's been a topic of conversation for years. And it goes in with making sure the students feel safe. There are some areas that need more lighting, so I'd like to see B somewhere in our list be specifically mentioned. It's a specific goal.
Yeah, I agree. And as we can see, that is the one that we all collectively ranked the highest of this category as well. But it could, nestle itself under infrastructure, but if we're going to keep the HSU category, it can stay here too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this next one was around 5G. And our city attorney continues to sort of monitor the legal frameworks and regulations around 5G. And this has come before the council a couple of times this last year for updates, but I don't think under the new council we've had a conversation about 5G.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do with it. Yeah. I don't know. What are people's thoughts on this?
I don't really feel like it's something we're going to have to, I don't know if it's, if we're really a target for it, if it's something that we're going to really have to worry about in the near future. I'd be okay if we took it off for now.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think we're entering the territory of, the ones that none of us ranked very highly. So I agree that one doesn't seem like a priority for me, and I haven't really heard anything about it either.
So I'm wondering, maybe the question is for these last three, is there anything that we feel warrants a discussion over having as a higher priority?
Not for me, I don't think.
Okay.
As much as it would be really nice to have a city council office and meeting space, it just doesn't, compared to everything else, meeting in our local coffee shops and such does seem to be working.
I will say the one, or at least the regional marketing, I think that there was another spot that I remember I wrote on my sheet. I was like, I think this can fit with this. But just kind of our general, with economic recovery, I think that goes with, having a common branding and having, a common, like I've been seeing like the wear the mask signs and they all look the same and they look very nice and there's like a cohesive branding. And so I think that could partially go, just to, on that sub point D there, and explore a comprehensive, marketing, because it does, it falls in that tourism category, I feel like too.
And that is a big thing that we talk about in our economic recovery meetings, is when we're collaborating with Main Street and the chamber and different things, as we do work on those regional strategies. So I agree.
I will say there was a little bit of money that the council did budget around, city council office meeting space for this fiscal year. We are still looking at some plans just to create some space in the existing council office that would be more private. So, I can still bring those to you if there's something we can do on that this year.
Yeah, I'd like to see 17, even if it's low priority, just to stay on the list. I think as COVID ends and we go back to normal, there's a lot of times where I think City Hall is the most appropriate place to meet somebody, if it's a project developer, maybe something of that nature. And often the council room and council chambers can be taken up with staff meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, I mean, I said this last year too, this is not a particularly high priority for me. I feel like anytime I've needed a meeting room, I've been able to acquire one, but if other folks do feel strongly about it, I'll leave it up to you all.
I'm fine with leaving it on and just, and then just, we can discuss what the funds are and what's to be done and then make a decision from there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty ambivalent about it. It doesn't, I'm not excited either way really, but it would be great to have that. But if not, especially right now that we're all at home, hopefully not for too much longer, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same.
All right, and then around number 15.
I think that is covered in a lot of our other goals, as far as beautification and cleanup and safety. So I'm fine with hiding that one.
We'll say Councilmember Winkler was a longtime graffiti remover in our community. He has told me that he will get back to work as he's vaccinated and things are opening up under COVID. So I think he'll hopefully be coming on as a volunteer with the city to keep up some of those efforts. All right. Are there any specific goals that are still in your mind that you just don't think are addressed in our documents? Haven't come up for discussion that you would like to discuss tonight?
One that we hid, but I've kind of thought about it as we kept going over it, was under the first goal under housing. I think it was G. It was about looking more long-term at a cooperative housing model. And I don't think that, getting that done in 1 year is going to happen, but I would like to keep it on the list if everyone's okay with it as something that we start looking at or start looking for funding or space for. I just would like to keep that as like a long-term goal that might span a couple years, but that we don't forget about or, keep saying, oh, we'll get started on it next year. Oh, we'll get started on it next year. So just if everyone else is okay with it, I'd like to keep it.
That sounds good to me.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, Brett and Emily could speak to this, but in the housing working group, we went through the priority projects that came out of your stakeholder meetings with that group again this month. And this cooperative housing model had a lot of strong support in the working group as well.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else? Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, I feel like we read through everything. So I don't know if anyone needs a refresher on anything or what's the will of the group.
I'm good with what we've done.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited. It looks great. And I'm just happy we did the stakeholder process. I think it was really valuable. I think a lot of us got to make some great connections and learn a lot more about the process too. And so it's been a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I so agree. I think that we have a really exciting list, and it really does feel like it came from the community because of all the stakeholder meetings. So I feel really good about that. So yeah, I feel really good with where we're at.
Okay, great. Well, I guess in terms of next steps, when do we think this will come back again for, do you think in the budget process, or will it be something we vote on at a later date? I know sometimes we vote on it in a future council meeting sometime.
I think my recommendation, if it's all right with the council, is that because it's been hard on Zoom to kind of hone in on stuff. We're usually all sitting in the same room looking at the same screen. Is that we will clean up language. We will try to streamline these where we can, and then maybe just bring them back. And I can even just put them on a consent calendar item in April. And that way you guys will just have them in front of you again. You can read through them. And if you want to pull it and talk about wording changes, prioritization changes, if we've missed something, you'd have one more chance to look at them before we really get into budget discussions. Because this is what our staff will build our budget around trying to deliver to you. So if that's agreeable, I think it would be a good kind of final look.
How's it sound?
I think that when the budget piece comes in, that'll be really important for me, especially being new, because I look at this and it's just, yes, all right, let's do it. But I think that as we see the budget, and if you're saying, okay, you can do this, but now we can't do this anymore, that's where it's going to get tricky. So I feel like this is a wonderful start. And to me, seeing it on the budget, seeing those line items for our goals and priorities and what will have to be considered to be left out will be that'll be an important part of the process.
Okay, well, it sounds like then that process is agreeable to have it come back on a future agenda on the consent calendar, and then it'll get incorporated into the budget planning process. Okay. Okay, great. Well, any final thoughts from the council or from staff? Okay. Well, I won't keep us longer. Then, well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. And those that joined us today, I'm so glad that this is how you spent your Thursday evening with us. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.